Captain Bill and Tommy too. Adventures waiting just for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Torque and Thrust Talk Show. I am your host, Bill.
Tommy.
Yep, and man, we've been offline for a while. We'll kind of go into that before we get into the main episode because we got a lot of updates, and unfortunately, it's always when we tend to leave the show for a couple months and take a break or something comes up is when all the crazy stuff happens. So, Tommy, why don't you update us? What have you been doing the past couple months for the holidays? Stuff that's maybe have changed.
A lot has changed. My schedule's getting ready to change. I've moved more into a managerial role at work. Um, as a side hustle, I started running my own business as a door dasher. Uh, spent Christmas with the grandchildren, which is always a blast. And I recently found out that I'm going to be a father-in-law. My one and only daughter got engaged. Um, and other than that, we both of us have just been working.
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot of working. For those of you that do not follow me on any other social media, should probably do that. No, I finished my upgrade training here at my current airline. I started in late October, which is kind of the driving reason why we took such a kind of delay with the show because we were kind of all in a point where we were super busy and trying to focus on other things. And like I said, this show is not our primary form of income. Therefore, unfortunately, it doesn't take priority over other real life stuff. So from the end of October to middle of December, actually, I was in upgrade training with my current airline. So I upgraded onto the Boeing 737. So as we say, just jumped the trash bag over to the left seat. It was a great experience. I had a great first officer. He was a new hire first officer coming over from Spirit, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Perfect timing on his part, but made me look good. It was very challenging because not technically in terms of like the things going wrong, but it was very challenging in workload. They really put an emphasis on hand flying the aircraft and workload saturation and workload management. And then I hit the line in mid-December, had one day off, and then immediately went and flew my first 3 trips. The first 2 were back-to-back over Christmas. Luckily got New Year's off, and then I had my third trip back my third trip a couple days ago. And overall, it's been great. I've had outstanding first officers. I only had 2. The first 2 trips with the same first officer, poor soul. But they have been outstanding. That I would like to think that's who I was in the right seat. But they backed me up really well. And were awesome, which really helped because I went to some of the most challenging airports. My first airport was San Jose, Costa Rica, which is one of the most challenging airports to go to in South America or Central America, excuse me. But I had good backup there and everything was going fine. The weirdest thing that happened on the second trip is the ground crew in San Francisco sheared the tow bar off of our nose wheel during pushback on a wet night. I don't know what caused that, but the main problem there was it took 15 minutes for the ramp crew to finally admit that they broke the shear pin. And it took a little bit of interrogating from my side, ask them, because all they would tell me is the tow bar broke. And so I finally had to ask, did it break in half? Did it break at the the tug, or did it break at the nose wheel? And they finally said after 15 minutes, oh, well, it broke at the nose wheel. I'm like, well, I needed to know that 15 minutes ago because that's a required maintenance inspection. We got pushed off the gate. Once maintenance came out, inspected the tire, did the inspection and cleared the maintenance right up. And then we got pushing and just terrible weather in San Francisco. We departed 10 left, which I've never done before. And then also, as we're taxiing out, this aircraft under tow by maintenance, I assume, cut us off and nearly hit us in San Francisco, which luckily my FO and I were paying attention. So, and the second one wasn't bad either, except coming into, and Tommy will love this because we were just talking about this actually, about coming into to bad weather and coming into O'Hare. So on my red eye from Portland, Tommy was tracking me. Everything was fine the entire flight. We're getting into O'Hare. I had a little bit of concern because I am a high minimums captain, which means that because I have less than 100 hours in the left seat, there are certain minimums I have that are higher than normal. So, for example, a standard Cat 1 ILS will get you in at about 200 foot and half a mile visibility, but for a new captain, it's actually 301. So we can't shoot the approach unless we have at least 301. My company, because we're big, we have some exemptions, and also because we auto land, so that kind of adjusts it. But long story short, O'Hare was reporting great braking action, good braking action on a wet runway. Visibility was about 3 statute miles in snow and about 1,000, 1,200 foot ceiling. So not too terrible, way above what I would need as a high minimum captain. So in order to shoot down a normal Cat 1 ILS, our exemption, the autopilot has to be on. Autopilot has to be on. But there's a caveat: if the braking action is less than good, so less than a 5, I'm limited to 15 knots of wind, and the visibility has to be at least 3/4 miles, right? So I'm like looking at the ATIS, it's not going to be an issue. I come flying down. We check in with Tower. Tower says braking action 10 center 333. Winds are 350 at 15. And I'm just sitting there going, and we're in the middle of configuring, and I'm like, uh-oh. And I'm like, in my head, I'm going, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. I said, that is my limit. And so I was telling my first officer, I was like, okay, 333. I said, my limit is 15 knots to be able to go down to decision altitude. I said, check the winds again. Ask him what the winds were. He goes, 350 at 15. I'm like, okay, that's literally at my limit, and we have the visibility. And my first officer, sharp guy, was like, yes, checks. Do you want more auto brakes? I said, yeah, throw me up to 3, right? Because we base it off of the braking action. And then and then in the meantime, I was already planning a full flap landing, flap 40, because I was anticipating the runway being contaminated. So in the process of that, between 1,500 feet and 1,000 feet, we had that mini discussion about what the heck was going on. And then on top of that, also was fully configured by 1,000 feet, Rockstar FO, right? And I was the one flying. So it was one of those things. I'm like, of course it happens like right as we're trying to get in here. A little bit, not, it wasn't gusty, but definitely turbulent because you're coming through the clouds. I had a beautiful landing on 10 center. And then it was extremely icy clearing the runway. The runway was fine. Our braking action was actually good. It was a 5. But once we cleared the runway, I was taxiing at like 5 knots. You probably could have walked faster to the terminal than I did, than I was taxiing, because of how slow I was taxiing. And the reason is I hate driving my 3.5 ton pickup truck in ice, let alone a 75-ton airplane. So I was taking it super slow all the way to the gate. Hey, but we still got there on time. But I
Good call there.
took my sweet time getting to the gate. And then between all that madness of my first 3 trips as an airline pilot, I was doing stuff for the Torque and Thrust talk show. As you can tell, looks a little bit different. We're not using Restream anymore because for $20 a month, we were getting terrible video quality and not very good features. No offense to Restream, it's a good platform, just not what we wanted. So Tommy and I switched to OBS. We're live on Twitch, Discord, and YouTube. Hopefully Facebook. We got to get enough followers on Facebook, but now there's dedicated pages on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook specifically for the Torque and Thrust talk show. So it will no longer be streamed on Tommy and I's individual channels. It is one collective channel now to try to solidify the Torque and Thrust talk show. Another cool feature also is the chat. So if you join our Discord, there's something that is for a live show chat that pops up. And that, if you type in there on our Discord, we can see it on our Restream chat. And also every other person on every other platform can also see it. So it's all integrated. Also, if you want to see the Torque and Thrust talk show, let's say you're watching on Twitch and you're like, hey, I want to watch this on YouTube, type in exclamation point YouTube, and then the bot will give you the link for the YouTube. And that goes for YouTube, Discord, our new stuff on Blue Sky, as well as if you type in, right now I only have mine set up, exclamation point Captain Bill Official, it'll pop up with all my links, individual links, and I'll set up Tommy's for next show as well. So a lot of cool technology integration that we're trying to implement into the show, as well as a kind of a different format. Isn't that right, Tommy?
Yeah, yes, we do have a little bit of a different format here. And we do have a jam-packed episode today filled with some big news. So let's dive right in.
Absolutely. So first up, we've got to talk about Spirit Airlines, right? They're in the news for filing for bankruptcy. And what do you think about that, Tommy?
It's pretty wild, right? Spirit has always been known for their budget-friendly flights, but with everything going on in the airline industry, it's just been a roller coaster. I mean, who would have thought that we would see the day where a budget airline would be struggling like this?
Seriously, yeah, the pandemic hit the industry hard, but Spirit seemed to bounce back faster than most. What do you think went wrong?
Well, I think they had a lot of operational issues like flight cancellations and delays. Plus, with rising fuel costs, labor shortages, it's like they were fighting an uphill battle. I just hope their loyal customers don't get left hanging.
Right? It's tough to see such a beloved airline face these challenges. And let's hope they come back stronger after this, which we both know it's not actually true because they're filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy. But speaking of comebacks, have you heard any updates on GTA 6?
Oh, you know, I'm all about that gaming life. Rockstar finally dropped some teasers. They're promising a massive open world and some pretty impressive graphics. I can't wait to get lost in that.
Same here. It's been a long wait and still is a long wait, but I'm excited to see what they've done and I hope they learned something from the criticisms of GTA 5.
For sure. The hype is real, but let's hope they deliver. I mean, it's been years. If they don't nail it, they're definitely going to have some very upset gamers.
Oh, definitely. And I can already hear the keyboard warriors getting ready to unleash their fury. But speaking of delivering, let's kind of switch gears over to Motor Trend news. Did you catch the latest updates on the automotive front?
Oh, definitely. They just released some reviews on the newest electronic vehicles. It's incredible how fast the industry is evolving. I mean, we're talking about cars that practically drive themselves.
Yeah, it's insane. And the technology is improving rapidly. And it makes me wonder how realistic simulations and games like racing titles compared to the actual driving experiences.
That's a great point. There's definitely a balance between realistic simulation and, you know, the fun factor. I mean, some games go all out with hyper realistic graphics and physics, while others embrace the more arcade style approach.
Right? Yeah. Personally, I love a good racing sim where I can feel like I'm actually behind the wheel. But sometimes you just want to hit the gas and drift around corners without worrying about flipping the car.
Totally. There's a place for both. I think realism is cool, but if it starts to feel like a chore, then what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, gaming should be fun, whether it's a super realistic sim or an arcade style thrill ride.
Couldn't agree with you more.
And so that's all we have today for aviation and gaming news. But up next, we're going to do a classic of the show, kind of a staple, something, even though we're changing format, we don't really want to remove it from the show as a segment, but we're going to be doing some jargon in a jiffy, but it is a little bit different this morning. I kind of surprised Tommy this morning because I didn't want him to prepare in any way, shape, or form. But the way this is going to work is I'm going to send Tommy a picture via Discord. Okay? You guys can see it up here. He can't see it quite yet, but I'm going to send him a picture via Discord. And what Tommy's going to do is he's going to guess the type of airplane, the official name of it, if there's an official industry or manufacturer name, for example, like F-14 Tomcat, and then he's going to guess the affectionate nicknames that we call them as professional pilots, and we'll see if he can get them.
Okay, so that's a CRJ.
Okay.
CRJ 700?
Close. Close. You're definitely in the right family. Let's just put it that way. You're in the right family.
900?
No, what's the other one? So there's
That
three.
isn't
Well, no, I
CRJ.
guess you're right. There is four technically. What's the
So it's the
smallest one?
7, 8, 9, and the 1,000. Oh, 500. 550?
Okay, so 550 is a variant. You're getting there. 550 is a variant of the of the 700. So there's a 7, a 9, and a what's the one I always complain about? The one that I always have to ride to work.
Oh, the CRJ 2.
There you go. So yeah, so for those of you that are listening, this is a CRJ 200, which is what popped up here. So this is the CRJ 200. It's part of the CRJ, or now I guess it's the Mitsubishi CRJ 200 series, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a 2, a 7, a 9, and technically a 1000 that doesn't really fly in the United States. It has its own market out in Europe. So, okay, you're correct. Now, the CRJ 200, does it have a name that you know of that was issued by the manufacturer other than a Mitsubishi CRJ 200?
I do not. I do
Okay,
not.
you're right. There isn't. There isn't one that's like the CRJ 200 blah. But do you know, and you might have heard me say it a couple times, what we call this airplane as pilots, as people in the industry?
If you did say it, it was the last time you were on one. That was
Yeah,
quite a while
which is
ago.
like every week. So
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
actually fly this one to work. So
I do not recall. I'm
okay.
sure there is.
Yeah,
Um,
okay. So the first one we call it the pig, and there's two reasons. If you can see at the very front of the light, the very nose, the nose lights or the landing lights are in its nose. It has two separate ones. It makes it look like a pig snout, and we also call it the pig because of how slow it climbs. It doesn't perform very well. So for example, from where I live to Chicago, it's a parabolic arc. It never actually cruises. It just hits its cruise altitude and then descends down the other
and
side.
then starts coming right
Yeah.
down.
We also the Mighty Deuce, or like I call it, the Dirty Deuce, is also another name for that airplane as well. All right, Tommy. Good. All right, coming up, I sent you the next one here.
Yeah, another CRJ.
Mm, is it though? I'll give you a hint. This is the one I first upgraded on. I was a check pilot on this one.
Oh, the Embraer.
There you go, Embraer 145. Yeah, and the official name is that's it. It's the Embraer 145. We call it the 145. Is what you hear on the line. Affectionate names for it. There's quite a few. The electrical reset jet, the ERJ, kind of Embraer. It stands for electrical reset jet. And there was literally behind the captain on by the jump seat a circuit breaker panel that if you popped it open, there was an electrical reset switch that would be used every now and then to reset stuff. Some funnier ones, Scooter, because it's a little airplane. The Jungle Jet. It was produced in Brazil and flown around Brazil, so we call it the Jungle Jet. The Barbie Jet because it's so small. My favorite is Whiscod. Stands for Whistling Steel Can of Death. The S doesn't actually stand for steel, but I'm not gonna say it live on air. But Whistling Steel Can of Death. And then my favorite, Lawn Dart, because it looks like a lawn dart. All right, Tommy, you ready for the next one? You're doing good so far. All right, here is the next one I had just sent Tommy.
An Airbus 319.
So we're kind of going in order of what I've flown too, from the smallest regional to kind of up. So it's not an Airbus.
Oh, it's the 175. Embraer
There
175.
you go. Yep, that's the Embraer 175. So I was a captain on this airplane too. And the most distinctive way, it kind of looks like a 7.3, but its winglets, unless it's a 170, are kind of out. They're kind of at a weird
band outwards.
The 175 doesn't have an official name. It's just we just call it the 175. I haven't heard any real affectionate names. The ones that I came up for it when I was flying it was the spaceship, because it is literally one of the most technologically advanced aircraft I've ever flown. But also, I also called it the G-Wagon, because it's a station. It's basically a station wagon. It kind of sits around low on the backside, on the main wheels. It carries a lot of people. It flies great, but it doesn't look very fast, but it's fancy. So I call it the G-Wagon. Here comes the next one, Tommy.
That's 3.
Oh my God, no. What is it? Uh-oh.
Oh, now I see it. This is an Airbus.
There you go. It's an Airbus A321. There's obviously different variants. They're called the bus, right? The Airbus. But
the bus.
Have you ever heard of its affectionate nickname?
I've only heard it ever called the bus.
Yeah, okay. So the bus, the affectionate name for it is called Fifi. So you've heard the stories of the PTU, right? The barking dog. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Fifi is the name of a French dog. All right, this next one you should be able to get. Okay, send it to you.
Another Airbus?
No. So our Airbuses at United are not ETOPS qualified.
Oh, it's 777.
Look.
No,
I'll say look at look at the main landing gear.
I digress. 7.3.
That's a 7.3 Max 9.
Max 9.
Yeah, the way you can tell, at least on United aircraft, is after the wing. If you see that plug door back there, that's how you generally know it's a 9ER or a Max 9. Is that extra door? And then the way you know it's a Max is the cookie cutter engines on the back of the engines, the cookie cutter shape. That's supposed to help with noise abatement. Okay. But do you know the name? Just the general name that we call, I've said it a million times, the affectionate name that we call the 737. We call it the Guppy. And the reason we call it the Guppy is because the Boeing 747, when it came out, the Queen of the Skies is the official, unofficial name, which don't worry, it's not in here because it's not currently flying. But the Queen of the Skies, it was called the Whale because of the hump. It looked like a whale. And so when the 7.3 came out, it looked like a guppy fish. So the 700, I call the baby guppy. It's super tiny, and that's most of the time what I say. That's probably when I use it the most, is when I'm talking about a baby guppy. Or baby Boeing is another one that they talk about. And then the 800, and now these are the ones that I came up with just because they don't have them. I haven't heard any. But like the 800, I call it the flapjack because you can always get a nice, smooth, butterly landing with it because it's the best variant out of all of them. And that's the NG. The 900, the straight nines, is I just said. I call them straight nines because they're not ERs. At our company, there's only 12 of them, so we call them the Dirty Dozen. If you fly them, they're mainly out of Houston. The 900 ERs, I call them pogos or the pogo stick, because that's how you feel when you're landing. Because the gear is so far back that when you go to flare, you're just driving the landing gear into the ground. So we call it the pogo stick. And also, there's a kickstand for tail tipping that goes in the back that looks like a pogo stick. And then the Max aircraft, we just call Max. I call them Guppy Maximus, but we just call them Maxes. And on to the next. We're almost done. This one I feel like you should know. And if
Oh,
anybody's
that's a
watching,
7.5.
yeah, easy. I would say if anybody's,
Undoubtedly, that is a 7.5.
you're gonna enjoy these nicknames. I know you are. The coolest nickname I've ever heard for this airplane was the Atari Ferrari, and that is because it came out in the 1980s, and it was very advanced with its partial glass cockpit at the time, and it is a very high performance aircraft. It flies very well, so they call it the Atari Ferrari. Or if you're talking about the 300 variant, the really long one, we call it the Flying Pencil because it's really long. Here comes another one. Now this
That's
one,
trip.
not quite. Triples don't have the winglets, right? So remember, we're kind of going up in size. So we just did the 7.5. So what would be the
Oh,
next?
is this is a 7.6.
It's called Stumpy. Don't ask me why. I have absolutely no idea. I had to look it up. The only thing I could think of is that it wasn't quite as big as a triple. I don't know. It's the weird. I don't know why they named it Stumpy. I just sent you another one. This one you should be able to get. This is one
Yeah,
of
that's
your.
a trip 7.
There you go. Yeah, it's a 777.
But
Easy.
because when the picture populated on my phone, it was just of the main gear.
Do you know what they call it? What's the affectionate name for it?
I always thought it was just the trip.
777 is kind of what we refer to it as, but it's also referred to as Bigfoot or Sasquatch because it has the largest main landing gear truck. Because even I'm trying to remember, the 7.4 I think only had it had a ton of wheels, but one truck I think at most had like 4 wheels on it. I think the triple was the only one that had 6 per truck, so that's why they call it
Mhm.
Sasquatch or Bigfoot. All right, here is the last one, Tommy. This one should be pretty easy. This is one of the most
It's a
popular.
7.8.
Yeah, I would say most popular amongst what should we call it? Amongst plane spotters. They love to
Mhm.
film them, especially in LA. Even though my first officer had a beautiful landing in LA, they were too busy staring at a Japan Airlines 787 across the airport waiting for a gate. I sent you that meme that I made. Um, I was like, "Are you serious?" My FO had a beautiful landing on 25 left, which is where the spotters were on YouTube. But as he was landing, they panned to the 7.8, who's just sitting there waiting for a gate on the north side of LA. Well, what's the official name of the 7.8? This one does have an official
That
name.
is the Boeing 787 Dreamliner.
Correct. Do you know what the nickname is?
No.
We call it Sparky.
Mm.
Because when it first came out, it's the first aircraft to have lithium ion batteries as a source versus the lead acid.
Really?
And the first couple times it came out, and it got grounded almost immediately because the lithium ion batteries were overheating and catching fire. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Jargon in a Jiffy. Now we're on to our meat and potatoes of our topic today, or of our podcast today. We're talking about simulation or overstimulation. I don't know why I was stuttering on that. I'm the one that came up with the name. Simulation or overstimulation. So, Tommy, if you want to take it away.
Yes, thank you. Today we're tackling a really interesting topic that affects a lot of fields, from healthcare to aviation, and even video games. Realistic training simulations versus unrealistic simulations.
Yep, that's right. It's a conversation that's been gaining traction as technology advances. So, Tommy, let's start off by defining what we mean by realistic and unrealistic simulations.
Sure, realistic simulations are designed to closely mimic real life scenarios. They often use detailed graphics, accurate physics, and real world data to create an immersive experience. Think of flight simulators that replicate the cockpit of the actual airplane.
Exactly. And then on the other hand, unrealistic simulations might simplify or exaggerate certain elements that can be more abstract or gamified, like those training games that focus on quick decision making, but don't necessarily reflect the complexities of real life.
Right. And that brings us to an essential question: which type of simulation is more effective for training?
And that's a loaded question because realistic simulations can provide high fidelity flight training, or excuse me, high fidelity training experiences. For example, medical professionals can practice a surgical procedure on simulators that they closely replicate on human anatomy. And this hands on experience can build confidence and skills before they ever operate on an actual patient.
True, but unrealistic simulations can also have their benefits. They often allow for rapid learning by breaking down the complex tasks into simpler components. Plus, they can be less intimidating. Think of how video games teach players to strategize without the pressure of real life consequences.
And that's a great point. And when you factor in cost, unrealistic simulations can be much more affordable to develop and deploy, and they can also be more accessible to a wider audience. And you don't need a full flight simulator setup to practice basic navigation skills, which you can do in a mobile app.
Exactly. But let's not forget the potential downsides of unrealistic simulations. They may lead to a false sense of security or a lack of preparedness for real world challenges. If someone trains in a simplified environment, they might struggle when faced with real life complexities.
And that's a valid concern. It's all about striking the right balance. Some training programs combine both realistic and unrealistic simulations to maximize learning. For instance, a pilot might start with a basic flight simulator that focuses on navigation and then move more to a more realistic setup for actual flying practice.
That hybrid approach seems to be gaining popularity. It allows learners to build foundational skills in low stakes environment before progressing to a more complex scenario.
Absolutely. And let's not overlook the psychological aspect because realistic simulations can be more stressful, which can be a double edged sword. While they prepare you for real stress, they can also lead to anxiety during training.
On the flip side, unrealistic simulations can foster creativity and out of the box thinking. They encourage learners to experiment and take risks without the fear of failure.
So it sounds like both types of simulations have their place in training, and it really depends on the goals and context of training.
Exactly. And as technology continues to evolve, we might even see more innovative hybrid solutions that incorporate the best of both worlds.
I'm excited to see where this goes. Well, that wraps us up for the discussion for today. And what are your thoughts, our fellow listeners? Do you prefer realistic or unrealistic simulations? And let us know on our social media.
And don't forget to subscribe for more engaging conversations about simulations and their impact on their world.
Oh my God. Thank God that's over. All right. So, to be fully transparent with you all, if you guys remember back in October when we did our last episode, Tommy and I discussed, or 2 episodes ago, we were talking about whether or not AI was going to take over the podcast industry with AI script generating. And what you just heard, this podcast, about 60% was an AI generated script by originality.ai. So the sections you guys can probably tell were the intro, the news, everything basically but the jargon in a jiffy and us updating everybody. So definitely let us know if you guys are listening. Let us know on our social media. You can email us at Torque and Thrust. So Torque, the letter N, Thrust, TS at gmail.com. And let us know what you think. Is that something that you guys would like to see more of, us using a AI generated script? Because it wasn't too terrible, in my opinion. The problem is reading it and trying to discuss things. For example, there's a lot of ad-libbing I wanted to add in there about certain stuff.
And some of it just people who have been with us now coming into the second year of us doing this, by now they know you and I have different ways of speaking.
Yeah, and the thing I would say definitely with this, something that is beneficial because I was just kind of checking the timestamp is we normally hit around the 90-minute mark on these shows. I will say it kind of it takes our thoughts and make
Completely
it more
condensed.
concise. Yeah, exactly. It makes it more concise for us, which is a time saver, which is not really a concern. For me, this talk show is more about the discussion than anything. But with that being
Right.
said, yeah, with that being said, folks, we're going to wrap it here. Just as a reminder, though, we do have our own dedicated YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch page as well. We're also now on Blue Sky Social. That's the backup just in case TikTok decides to get banned. Well, it's not TikTok. The U.S. federal government decides to ban TikTok this year. The way you get to that is if you go into our chat or even in Discord and you use !Blue Sky, all one word, it'll pop up with our socials on there as well. So we're going to kind of evolve this. This is going to be where the platform stays. So if you're looking for the show on one of our platforms, it's not going to be, it's all going to be on Torque and Thrust Talk Show solamente, only here. So definitely go check those pages out. Like I said, Facebook is a big one. We need some more followers and stuff on there to be able to go live on there. But we do have a Facebook page, Twitch page, YouTube, Blue Sky, and a TikTok page as well if you want to go follow us on there. With that being said, our next show is going to be January 16th, right here on all these channels, 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 a.m. Eastern. And for the Torque and Thrust Talk Show, I am Bill.
And I am Tommy.
And have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.
In the sky, the engines roar. On the ground, the wheels explore. From the cockpit to the open road, stories of the brave unfold.